The day I accepted an invitation to dinner with my family at a restaurant, I never imagined I would hear the most humiliating words of my life. In front of everyone, my own parents told me I was a loser, only fit to be a cleaning lady, recalling the job I had when I left home at 17. To them, the one who truly mattered was my brother, the company manager, the perfect son. But at that very dinner, something happened that would change everything. A customer at the restaurant recognized me and in front of my parents called me Comandante. It was at that moment that they discovered the truth about me. Hello, welcome to this channel. Like and subscribe to this channel, enjoy, and turn on notifications. Comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to leave a heart in your comment. From a young age, I learned not to expect much from my family. I grew up in a household where everything revolved around my older brother, Raphael. He was always my parents' pride and joy, a good student, athletic, and popular. And me, I was the one who was a handful, the distracted one, the one who would never amount to anything. I heard these phrases so often that, at 17, I decided to leave home. At the time, I took the first job I could get, cleaning a simple hotel downtown. For my parents, that was confirmation that I was doomed to failure. For years, they refused to look for me. They didn't respond to my messages, they didn't answer my calls. And yet, deep down, as much as I didn't want to admit it, I still carried a glimmer of hope that one day they would truly look at me. This opportunity came unexpectedly. After much work, study, and silent effort, my life had changed. But my parents had no idea. And perhaps it was for the best, until the day I received an invitation to a family dinner at a fine restaurant in the city. Raphael sent the message as if nothing had happened, saying my parents wanted to see me and catch up. I didn't know exactly why, but I accepted. When I got there, I was met with that same attitude that always accompanied me: superior looks, sideways words, comparisons disguised as jokes. Only this time, it had a more bitter taste. During dinner between courses, my father let slip the first comment. In a harsh tone, he said, "Funny, you've always been the odd one out in the family, haven't you? While your brother is a successful manager, were only good for cleaning, as I recall." My mom laughed shamelessly. "Yeah, at least there's plenty of cleaning around here. Someone has to do that job, right?" They continued, as if commenting on the weather, completely ignoring the fact that I was there, listening. It was as if everything I'd achieved didn't matter at all, because to them, I'd always be the one who left the house to clean the bathroom. The waiter arrived with more wine, but even that didn't soften the weight of the words. Raphael, of course, didn't let it go. "There's no point in stressing, Dad. Everyone is born for something different. Some to give orders, others to clean. It's not embarrassing, right? But it's quite different from being a company manager." I wanted to get up from the table and leave, but something held me back. Pride, anger, I don't know. All I know is that it was at that exact moment that a man, sitting a few tables back, approached. "Excuse me," he said with a polite smile. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but hello, Commander." That word echoed. "Commander." My parents looked at him, then at me, confused. "It's been a while since we've seen each other on the flights to Lisbon," the man continued. "It's always impeccable, you know. Your passengers are very lucky." I thanked him with a slight nod, and in that instant I realized everything had changed. My parents, frozen, looked at me as if they were seeing a stranger. It was the first time they were at a loss for words. But dinner wouldn't end there. This was just the beginning. After that night, the pieces began to fall into place. Secrets would come to light, the family's pride would be shaken, and fate would take twists and turns no one there could have imagined. I, the forgotten daughter, the failure, would not only be a captain on international flights, but I would also be the only person capable of lending a hand when they needed it most. Only this time, the price of forgiveness would be high. The restaurant, previously noisy, seemed to fall silent after the man called me Commander. My parents and Raphael stood still for a few seconds, their eyes fixed on me, as if they had just realized I was someone they had never actually met. My father scowled, trying to regain control of the situation, Commander. There must be some mistake, he said, not looking directly at anyone. The man smiled politely and replied, "No, sir. I work in wine exports, travel extensively, and have been on at least 3 international flights where your daughter was in the cabin. I even made a point of greeting you once upon disembarking. I remember it well." He waved goodbye before returning to his desk, leaving behind a strange weight in the air. My mother was the first to speak, still trying to understand, but international flights? What do you mean? It was almost funny to see the shock on her face, but I didn't smile. I just took a deep breath, keeping my cool. "Yes," I finally replied. "I'm an airline captain. I've been flying for years." "It's not new, but you were too busy with other things to notice." My voice didn't sound aggressive, it just sounded firm. As if I'd been rehearsing that scene for ages. Raphael, however, didn't seem willing to accept it. "Impossible. You left home at 17 to be a cleaning lady. You were always the one who gave the most work. How can you come up with this story now?" The anger in his eyes wasn't just disbelief, it was fear. And deep down, it made me realize something. My success threatened not only my parents' pride, but also the position Raphael had always held in the family. For years, he had been seen as the example, the role model. And now I saw someone even his own parents never considered capable of anything being recognized in public. I left home, yes, I stayed. But while you pretended I didn't exist, I studied, worked, and struggled. I started out cleaning airplane bathrooms, it's true. But between cleaning and learning, I chose learning. My mother, who had been silent until then, shook her head, almost as if trying to convince herself it was all a lie, but as an airplane passenger, that's not for people like us. "You had no money, you had nothing. You gave me nothing," I said, looking into her eyes. "But I built." Alone, silence returned to the table. Only the sound of silverware from other tables and background music filled the room. And for a moment, I wondered why I was still there. Why had I accepted that dinner? The answer came soon after when my father blurted out, still dismissively, "Even so, being an airline pilot doesn't mean much. It's just a job after all. You're still who you always were." The pain I should have felt was gone. I looked at him with the serenity of someone who'd long ago understood that some people will never change. But that night, unlike any other, I wasn't leaving carrying another wound. I would choose when and how to leave that table. So I decided to ask, with a small smile, "Why this dinner now? After years of no news, why suddenly call me?" Raphael looked away, but my father was blunt. His brother had some difficulties at work. "The company is going through cuts, and maybe he needs some help. And his mom thought it would be a good time to get the family together." I stifled the laugh that almost escaped. It was ironic. For years, I'd been invisible to them. Now, when Raphael was facing problems, they remembered I existed. "So that was why," I concluded. "You didn't call me to see how I was doing, you called me to ask for help." Raphael retorted defensively, "That's not the case either. But since we've now discovered you're doing well, it doesn't hurt to try, right?" The sentence hit me like an unexpected blow, but I kept my composure. I stood up slowly, grabbed my bag, and looked at the three of them. "You really haven't changed at all, not even a bit. But now I'm the one who chooses who I share my table with. Thank you for dinner. I've had enough." I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back, not that night. But the story wouldn't end there. That would be just the first of many difficult conversations. Because what they didn't yet know was that, soon, Raphael's problems would become much bigger than simple cost-cutting. And then, more than ever, they would depend on me. That night, after leaving the restaurant, I didn't go straight home. I drove for a long time aimlessly, just trying to process what had happened. Even after so long away from them, even knowing how much they despised me in the past, part of me still felt uncomfortable being treated as if everything I'd achieved was worthless. But there was also a different feeling now, a kind of relief, as if I'd finally exposed to them a truth I'd always insisted on hiding. I arrived at my apartment in the early hours of the morning. In the building's lobby, I met the doorman, Mr. Wilson, who always greeted me respectfully. "Good evening, Commander." "You're late today, huh?" "Good evening, Wilson. I was just taking care of some family matters," I replied with a small smile. I went upstairs, left my keys on the kitchen counter, and went straight to the balcony, where I usually sat and looked out over the city in the early hours. I always thought silence was better company than empty words. The next morning, I woke up to messages on my phone. First, one from Raphael. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Then one from my mother, saying that my father wanted to speak to me calmly. I didn't answer, but the phone rang. I almost dropped it when I saw who it was, my old airline boss. "Good morning, Captain. Sorry to bother you so early, but I received a strange request. Someone from your brother's company contacted me looking for a reference." Apparently there was a problem there. The call alerted me. If they were after my name, it wasn't a coincidence. "Got it, thanks for letting me know," I replied. "I'll let you know." As soon as I hung up, I stood there, staring at my phone for a few seconds. It didn't make sense. My brother had been a manager for years, always praised by everyone. Why would they be looking for references from me? That's when I decided to check for myself. I used some contacts in aviation and logistics, connections I'd made over the years on flights and at corporate events, and little by little, the pieces began to fall into place. Raphael wasn't just facing cuts at the company. He was being investigated for misuse of resources. And it was no small matter. There was talk of embezzlement, phantom contracts, the kind of thing that would not only cost him his job but could also land him in court. That night, as he was processing all this information, the phone rang again. This time it was my mom. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hi, Mom, daughter, we need to talk." "Things got serious. Your brother was removed today. He's desperate. And your father, and I don't know what to do anymore." Her tone was very different from what it had been in the restaurant. There was no more arrogance, no more superiority. There was fear, despair. "I already know, Mom." "I found out earlier today," I replied calmly. "But why are you calling me now? Why don't you solve this yourself? You know, daughter, your brother, he's always been hot-headed. Sometimes he gets into things he shouldn't have. But you've always been more focused. We thought maybe you could help." Help, that word echoed in my head. For so many years, what I wanted most was to hear from them recognition, a single word that told me I mattered. And now, right now, they spoke to me out of need, not affection. "Mom, do you have any idea what you've done all these years? You pretended I didn't exist. Today at the restaurant, you treated me worse than someone who just entered your lives. And now, suddenly, I'm the solution." There was silence on the other end of the line. And then her voice cracked. "I know we messed up. But he's your brother, he's your family." That sentence weighed heavily. I stood there, silent, staring out the apartment window at the illuminated city, trying to decide what to do. Deep down, I knew I didn't need them. My life was already made. I had my career, my home, my achievements. But there was a part of me that still couldn't simply turn away and forget that, as much as they'd rejected me, they were still part of my story. "I'll think about it," I finally replied. "But I'm not promising anything." "Thank you, daughter," my mother said, almost crying. We regret everything so much." I hung up and held the phone in my hand for a while. For the first time, they had said something resembling regret out loud. But what I didn't yet know was that this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, I would discover that the whole ran much deeper than just a corporate scandal. Raphael was not only involved in illegal business, but he had also put his own family's name at risk. There were even documents signed by my father that could now drag him down with him. And sooner or later, they would all come knocking on my door again. 2 days had passed since my mother's last call. I hadn't given a concrete answer. In fact, I was waiting to see how far they would go before actually contacting me again, not out of convenience, but out of genuine necessity. During those 2 days, I continued working. I took 3 international flights, round trip, maintaining my routine in the coquito as if nothing were happening. But with each landing, when I turned off the engines and saw the ground crew approaching, I couldn't help but think about Raphael, how he must be trying to hold things together, or perhaps inventing more lies to try to save his own name. At dawn on the third day, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and needed a second to believe what I saw. My father. Never in all those years had he set foot in my apartment. I opened the door without saying anything. He looked different and haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, his hair grayer than I remembered. "Can I come in?" he asked, his tone lower than I expected. I nodded, letting him in. He entered slowly, looking around as if visiting a foreign territory. It was strange to see my father there, standing in my living room, surrounded by things I'd achieved without any help from him. "Nice here," he said after a few seconds. I didn't respond. I just watched, waiting for him to tell me the real reason for his visit. "Look, I know I wasn't the best father he started out as. I know I didn't treat you the way you deserved. But now things have gotten complicated." I didn't interrupt. I just kept listening as he struggled to find the words. "Your brother, he's going to be sued. And the problem is that there are documents in the company's name, signed by me too. If this goes ahead, I could lose everything. The house, the car, your mother won't know where to hide her head." He sighed heavily and ran his hands over his face, as if carrying an invisible burden. "And now you want me to solve it," I said finally. "I'm not asking for myself," he said quickly, unable to look me in the eye. "But it's your family, daughter." The silence between us lasted longer than I expected. I watched my father try to hold back his pride, clearly uncomfortable being there, somehow humiliating himself to the daughter he'd always ignored. "You know what's most ironic about all this?" I asked, looking directly at him. "For years, you said I was only good for mopping floors, and now here you are, asking for help from someone you've always made a point of belittling." My father didn't answer right away, he just lowered his head. "Yeah," and he mumbled. I was stupid. It was the first time I'd heard anyone admit something like that. But even so, I knew I couldn't rely on that alone. "Not now, and what exactly do you expect from me?" I asked, wanting to understand how far he intended to go with this. "We need a good lawyer, someone we can trust," and he answered. "And maybe some financial help until we resolve the situation. Don't you have any money saved?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Not in the way that would be necessary," he said, almost embarrassed. I stood there for a few seconds, considering what to do. It would have been easy to say no and close the door. But again, something inside me, perhaps pride, perhaps humanity, couldn't bring myself to act with complete indifference. "I'm not going to transfer money to anyone," I said firmly. "But I know people, serious lawyers. I'll recommend one for you, and if you still need help after that, we'll talk." My father let out a long sigh, perhaps of relief, perhaps of exhaustion. "Thank you, daughter, truly." He stood up, ready to leave, but before he did, he turned to me again. "You built all this alone, didn't you?" "Alone," I confirmed. My father shook his head and said softly, almost regretfully, "I should have seen it." When he left, I closed the door with mixed feelings. "Now aeroperto, now ainda. Mas havia algo saber que, mesmo que tarde, eles estivam começando em surgir quem eu realmente era. Na manhã seguinte, antes mesmo do café, recebi uma mensagem de Rafael. Era a primeira vez que ele me mandava algo, além de ironias ou phrases arrogantes, preciso falar com você. Por favor. Eu deixe o celular de lado e fui até a varanda. O sol estava nascendo, dourando os prédios de cidade. Eu sabia que, cedo ou tarde, essa conversa com Rafael teria que acontecer. Mas eu também sabia que, antes de estender a mão de verdade, ainda havia coisas que ele precisava ouvir e que eu precisava dizer. No mesmo dia em que recebi a mensagem de Rafael, não respondi de imediato. sai para correr pela manhã, algo que sempre me ajudou a organizar as ideias. Enquanto as ruas ainda estavam vazias, eu pensava em tudo, o que havia passado nos últimos anos, de menina invisível aos olhos de família comandante de uma companhia aérea internacional. Mas o que me surpreendia mais não era isso. Era perceber que, mesmo tendo deixado tanta coisa para trás, aquela sensação de querer reconhecimento verdadeiro ainda insiste em aparecer. De volta ao apartamento, tomei banho, preparei café e, só então, peguei o celular para responder, podemos conversar hoje às 19h, aqui no meu apartamento. Mas só se for para falar de verdade, sem mentiras. A resposta de Rafael veio em menos de 5 minutos, estarei aí. Quando ele chegou, já passava de sete. Veio sozinho, vestido diferente do habitual, sem terno, sem postura de gerente. Pela primeira vez em anos, ele percebeu cansado. O que ele disse, meio sem graça, assim que eu abri a porta. Entra, respondi, sem muita cerimônia. Ele olhou em volta, claramente desconfortável, como se estivesse passando em território desconhecido, exatamente como o nosso pai alguns dias antes. Nos sentimos na sala, cada de lado. Rafael foi o primeiro a falar, e eu não esperava que fosse chegar nesse ponto. Fiquei em silêncio, esperando que ele continuasse. E continuo, a empresa já estava mal fazia meses. Eu tentei segurar as coisas, mas quando me dei conta, já estava envolvido com gente que, bom, gente com quem eu não deveria ter me metido. Dinheiro. Perguntei, mesmo sabendo a resposta. E acute, e não só isso. Tive contratos falsos, notas frias. E eu acide muita coisa para tentar manter minha posição, para não perder fracassado na frente do pai. A sinceridade dele, a pesar de tardia, me pegou de surpresa. E eu jamais imaginaria ouvir aquilo saindo de boca de Rafael. E vou quer não penso que sido o tarde tudo isso viria à tona, questionei. E eu sou queria manter o que eu tinha, e ele respondeu, abaixando os olhos. E agora estou prestes a perder tudo. A polícia já foi atrás de empresa. Se investigar mais fundo, podem até confiscar bens. Permaneci em silêncio por alguns segundos, observando meu irmão. Pela primeira vez, ele não percebeu mais o intocável de família. He was just a lost man, drowning in bad choices. And where do I fit into this? I asked directly. Rafael took a deep breath before replying, I know you have money. And more than that, I know you have contacts. Lawyers, people who can help resolve or at least smooth things over. I came to ask for your help. It was strange to hear that coming from him. Rafael, who had always treated me like someone lesser, was now sitting in my living room asking for help. Do you have any idea how ironic that is? I asked, looking at him. For years, you thought you were better than me. At the restaurant a few days ago, you even had the nerve to humiliate me. And now here you are, waiting for me to fix your life. Rafael didn't answer immediately. He just shook his head, as if recognizing a painful truth. I know I have no right to ask for anything, he said, his voice breaking slightly. But I'm still asking. The silence that followed was heavy. I got up and walked to the balcony, standing with my back to him for a few moments. I watched the city lights come on, the cars passing below. When I returned to the living room, I decided to say something I'd kept to myself for a long time. You've always been my favorite, ever since we were kids. If I got a good grade, no one cared. If I did something right, it was my obligation. But if you made a mistake, excuses were readily available to protect you. I left home because I didn't want to live in that shadow anymore. Rafael lowered his head again. I know. And to be honest, I always knew. But I was too much of a coward to admit it. Those words echoed inside me in an unexpected way. Maybe it was the exact moment when old wounds began to heal, even if slowly. I'll think about it, he said finally. Not for you. But because, as much as it hurts, you're still my family. Raphael stood up, feeling lighter after that conversation, but before leaving, he stopped at the door. You know, right? You've always been better than me. It just took us a while to see that. He left, and this time, as I closed the door, I didn't feel angry, just a strange peace. There was still much to resolve, but some of the weight had been lifted. The next day, I would receive a call that would change everything forever. Raphael's company's situation had worsened. The family's assets were about to be frozen. Now, more than ever, they would need me. And finally, it would be my time to decide how far I was willing to go. The morning after my conversation with Raphael, I woke up to dozens of missed calls. My phone vibrated nonstop. The situation had definitely gotten out of hand. When I answered, it was the lawyers I had recommended to my mother a few days earlier. "Commander, good morning. I need to speak to you urgently." The family's assets were officially frozen this morning by court order. If the family doesn't provide collateral or negotiate directly with the court, her father and brother could face criminal charges as early as this week. It was when I heard this sentence that I understood. The tables had turned completely. A few hours later, already dressed in my captain's uniform, with a flight scheduled for a few hours later, I went to the building where my parents lived. It was a middle-class condominium, not as luxurious as I imagined they would be living, but still quite different from the place I grew up. When I walked in, the scene was almost cinematic. My father sitting on the couch with his head bowed, my mother crying softly, and Raphael standing, packing back and forth, visibly out of control. As soon as they saw me, all three of them stood up at once. "Daughter," my mother said, her voice breaking. "Don't call me that now," I interrupted, without raising my voice but firmly. "Let's get straight to the point." Raphael was the one who spoke. "The situation is untenable. If we can't resolve this today, they'll take the apartment, the car. They'll confiscate everything," my father added in a lower tone, "and I could go to jail." I stared at them for long seconds. Of all the things I imagined seeing in that house, I never imagined that one day I would be the one with the power to decide their fate. For years, I began, looking at each of them, you made me believe I was nothing. That my destiny was to be a cleaning lady, that I was worthless. When they saw me on the street, they looked away. And now they're here, needing me. My mother cried without saying a word. Raphael just breathed deeply, not having the courage to face her. I could have simply said no, and I continued. "And walk away like you did to me so many times. But I'm not like you. I don't carry enough hurt to let you sink." There was a heavy silence. My father this time was the one who had the courage to speak up. "I was wrong. We were wrong. You were always better than we dared admit. Forgive me." Those words, finally spoken, didn't erase everything that had been done. But they had real weight now. "I'm not here for you," I explained. "I'm here for me. Because I no longer need to prove anything to anyone. I've already won. And now I'm the one who decides who deserves my help and who doesn't." Raphael, still looking at the ground, said softly, "We regret it. Everything." I took a deep breath, pulling an envelope from my purse with the contact information for a well-known lawyer who specializes in crises like this. "Here's the lawyer's name and phone number. He'll handle renegotiating the debts and trying to release the assets before any more serious proceedings. I've already paid him the first installment of the fees in advance. But from here on out, it's up to you." My mother held the envelope, her hands trembling. Aren't you staying for dinner?" she asked, almost in a whisper. I smiled slightly, an old weariness melting away inside me. "No, now I'm the one with a flight booked." They didn't insist. They just watched me silently as I turned to leave. When I reached the door, I turned around one last time. "One thing you need to understand: forgiveness is not forgetting. I can help now, but that doesn't erase what happened. If you ever want to truly try to build something with me, let it be because of who I am, not what I can offer." I walked out and closed the door behind me. There were no screams, no desperate pleas, just the silence of someone who knows things will never be the same again. At the airport, As I was getting ready to board my flight, I stopped in front of a large glass panel and watched the planes taxiing on the runway. In that moment, for the first time, I felt true peace, and my story with my family wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them bow down. It was about me getting where I was on my own merits, even when no one believed me. When they announced boarding, I grabbed my carry-on bag, adjusted my captain's hat, and walked to the plane. There the crew was already waiting for me with a respectful smile. "Good morning, Captain. Ready for another flight?" I smiled back, "Always." And so it was that the forgotten daughter, the cleaning lady, the failure, left behind the last ties of the past, taking the place that was always hers through merit and courage. If this story touched your heart in any way, I ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone in your family or friends who also need to hear a message like this. Now tell me in the comments, if you were in this daughter's shoes, would you have helped your family after everything they did? Or would you have turned your back? I really want to hear your opinion. And please let me know which city you're watching this video from, so I can drop you a comment and leave you a heart. Every story we share here is designed to move, reflect, and perhaps inspire someone to see things differently. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, because it's through your comments that this chain of stories continues to grow and reach more people every day.